Hey Visionaries, welcome back to the Your Biggest Vision Show. I'm your host, Leah, and today we have as our guest, Chris Frederick. He is the Executive Director of Gay Pride in New York City. Hey Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You all, as you're hearing this, Chris, I think you're just coming off of doing World Pride in June. You're probably still exhausted from it. So you just celebrated 50 years since Stonewall's Uprising and of LGBTQ liberation. How are you feeling?
I mean, it's been nice to have a little downtime. I think that World Pride was a huge success for us. We had about 5 million people attend the events over those last 2 weeks of June. Did 25 plus events, raised over $200,000 for other organizations that are LGBT identified. And so we had a tremendous amount of success, and it's been nice to have a little bit of downtime as we go into 2020 planning season.
Awesome. Huge congratulations. I've heard nothing but amazing things from people in the community, and you very much deserve a vacation. 25 plus events in 1 month is no joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. We have a great team. We've had a lot of success over the last 10 years, and kind of continuing to build on that going into 2020. Next year is going to be the 50th anniversary of the Pride March.
Wow.
So there's back-to-back big anniversaries. So, we're kind of getting ready and starting to plan and think about like what next year looks like now that we're no longer creating World Pride, but back to a normal NYC Pride experience, which is still on an annual basis really big. So,
yeah.
It's going to be a really amazing year, I think, and we have a lot of exciting things planned.
This is my last question on it, but is New York's parade the biggest in the world, or is there a bigger one?
So it's my understanding it's definitely the largest in the world as it relates to LGBTQ pride marches or parades. This year, the event ran 12 hours and 30 minutes, which is crazy. I don't really know that many other marches or parades in the world that last that long. It's been interesting to see that event grow. I think that you've seen a lot of interest. It has become it's always been our kind of signature event, but, more and more people want to have that experience. They want to be a part of that experience. So it's definitely become our most popular event by far.
Sure. Amazing. Congratulations. I want to go a little bit further back before you were the executive director here. Where are you from, and what did you think you were going to be when you grew up, when you were younger?
So from Ohio originally, a small town in Northwest Ohio called Findlay. It's about 45 minutes south of Toledo, and, grew up there, graduated from Findlay High School, went to Ohio University for undergrad, and majored in political science. And so I kind of always had a passion for community organizing and politics, but also knew that I had a lot of passion around events. So moved to New York, a week after I graduated undergrad, and got a job working at Out Magazine, which is kind of the largest LGBT publication in the U.S., as the marketing and sales assistant, and then just kind of rose up within that organization. Eventually landed as doing being the event manager there for 4 years. So got my experience kind of building up LGBT-centric events, and then transferred over to Heritage of Pride, New York City Pride, where I've built up the organization and, had a tremendous amount of success in growing the organization from kind of the ground up. So it's been a fun ride.
What do you think it is about you or people similar to you where you have, you experience some sort of discrimination or challenge in your life, or you have the very daunting task
Well, yeah,
what?
I mean, I think that everyone that identifies as LGBT has a story and a moment where they felt as though that, you know, they were discriminated against in some way, shape, or form. You know, I've always been passionate about creating Pride every year because I think that Pride is that kind of last remaining space. You know, now that LGBT has become so mainstream within society, it is kind of that last remaining space where like everyone can come together for this one singular moment and feel as though that they are loved and respected and feel as though that they can hold hands with the ones they love and feel comfortable in their own skin. And so Pride has always kind of been that moment or that event that brings people together. And, you know, I think that as a white gay man, I have a very different lived experience than others within our community. And I think that that's what makes LGBT so really remarkable and interesting and is its diversity. So, you know, there are varied individuals within our community that have varying degrees of lived experiences. I have my own, but, you know, there is a wide array of discrimination within our community, specifically trans women of color, where, you know, they are more marginalized. They are the part of the community that tend to see the highest forms of violence against them. And so, you know, I think that overall it's good to understand that like we all kind of have varied degrees of lived experiences, but no one is greater than others. And I think that I'm always kind of thinking about how we can bring those voices and those experiences to life so that people have a platform during Pride to share their life and share, you know, why Pride is important to them.
Before you worked at Pride, you worked at Out Magazine, and it sounds like you started working there when you were 21, 22, pretty young. You know, what was the moment when you said, not only do I care about my rights, but I'm going to make it my career and I'm going to dedicate my life to it? Because that's a big decision. You know, so many people face levels of discrimination, many women, but, you know, and people of color, but to really say, I'm going to do this, was there a moment that you just realized you had it in you?
I mean, I think that when I saw the job posting for this role, I knew that I knew it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to really take on this responsibility. And it's a really challenging role sometimes because you have to be, you know, Pride is kind of like that organization where you have to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And so knowing that is your responsibility, there was a lot of weight on my shoulders when I first started and still remains. But I knew I wanted to take on that responsibility because I wanted Pride to be as great as I think people expected Pride to be. You know, when I first came on board, they had several years of deficits, and the organization was not on track in the right way to continue to grow. And, you know, if they were going to continue to kind of have these deficits, there was a chance that Pride would no longer exist in New York, or another organization would have to come in and help create it. And so I was passionate in knowing that I wanted to turn this place around, and I wanted to do it in a way that allows for us to have a greater voice within our community, and this organization provide that level of platform, or that platform for those voices that are not heard on a daily basis. And so, you know, I think that that's kind of where my initial interest came from. And I think we've had a lot of success as a result of, you know, this kind of year-over-year growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years.
Did you face some pushback when you came on board and changed the finances of the organization, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was very aggressive with growth over the last 10 years, and largely I was very aggressive because I knew that if we were going to host World Pride, we need to get it to a certain level of income that allowed us to create the best experience that I think people expect from hosting a World Pride in New York City. So, I was very aggressive, and I think that, now it's going to be kind of how do we readjust in a setting where we're not a $12 million organization anymore, but how do we come back to kind of reality, which is like a $5 to $6 million organization, which is where we left off in 2018. And I think that I'm excited about the next year because it's allowing us to kind of, how do we kind of create a soft landing for this so that long-term we're sustainable and can continue our track record of growth. And, but it's a bit more manageable to a level that I think that this organization can expect to see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that it's a lot to juggle to go through such a fluctuation, but you have to if you're managing something like World Pride in New York. Do you? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think that it's exciting because for so long that we were so laser focused on World Pride that now we get to start to think about like, well, what does Pride mean 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And what are our goals over the next 5 to 10 years to help us become a better organization? And now we're finally able to like take a step back and start looking at those things now that World Pride is over.
Right. You don't have this big thing that you're kind of making decisions around, I'm sure. That's how I feel about my wedding right now. I feel like I can't make any decisions until it's over.
Yeah.
Everything that I'm doing is like going toward my wedding.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes like such a part of your life and your identity. And I think for so long that's what everyone wanted to talk to us about as an organization is, what are you doing for World Pride? What are your plans?
Right.
And now it's like we can take a little breath and really start to be like, okay, like we've achieved what we needed to achieve, but like what does Pride look like 10 years from now? Because I think it is evolving, and every year is kind of has a different dynamic to it than the previous year. And so how can we start planning over the next 5 to 10 years to better serve our community and make sure that they feel like they are getting the best experience possible?
Other than this year's World Pride in June, was there a particular moment you've had in your time at Pride in New York that, while you've been working there, whether ED or not, where that like really stands out as just a big win or as a really exciting moment for the community that, just felt like we made a difference?
Well, I mean, I think that there's always been these moments that have kind of popped up over the years that kind of coincided with Pride.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, like, there are bad moments, like the Pulse shooting happened like the week of Pride. And so how do we like make sure that we are really honoring these really special individuals that, it had just happened, and how do we make sure that we are not tone deaf and make sure that we are honoring those that we have lost as a result of that shooting? But then we also had the year where the Supreme Court, finally allowed for gay marriage. And that happened essentially
like the day before. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like 3 days before our largest day. And, how can we make sure that like this really historic monumental moment is represented for generations? And so I think that it's thinking about, a lot of times we'll have to turn on a dime in terms of how can we adjust or tweak programming very, very last minute so that it allows for us to speak to whatever is happening at that single moment. And I think that we do pretty well at that. And I think that we've really excelled in kind of creating these millions of moments over the last, 50 years that, historians will look back at and say, wow, they really handled these really significant moments in LGBTQ history in a way that allowed for our generation to remember it forever.
Has there been any unexpected or maybe expected but still difficult challenges in gathering a community that does have something in common, but like you said earlier, is very, very diverse? I mean, a lot of people don't have a lot of things in common. So has there ever been challenges in unifying the community?
For sure. I mean, I think that it's because it's so diverse, there are so many unique points of view and voices within what makes up LGBTQ. And so you're always kind of tasked to like ensure that everyone feels as though that they have a seat at the table and they have a voice. And so that can sometimes be challenging, is trying to kind of condense all of these ideas and visions and thoughts together into one singular experience can be daunting and challenging and stressful. But I think that at the end of the day, we believe that we create the best experience for any Pride organization in the world. And it's a result of being connected to the community on what they want. And, you know, we're always evolving, we're always changing. And I think that that's what's always really exciting about New York City Pride, is that, like, I feel like we're never satisfied with the status quo. We're always kind of looking at how we can help more people, serve more people, create better experiences so that people feel as though that they are represented in some way, shape, or form through all of our programs. So, you know, it's a big task, but it keeps us on our toes as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I think being in New York, you kind of are the leader in a lot of ways. And so that's an honor, but it's also probably a lot of work some of the time trying to, you know, do things that no one else has done yet for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to have a thick skin and have to kind of be used to people having very pointed opinions about what you're doing. And I think at the end of the day, you have to just have your own conviction that, you know, you're doing what you think is right for the community, and that's the best you can do.
Yeah, definitely. So my audience, like on this podcast, many of them are entrepreneurs, and they work with, you know, they have their communities, which is usually like who follows them on Instagram and who's on their email list and their website traffic. In other words, much smaller communities than what you manage every day. But I feel like one of the challenges that solopreneurs or new entrepreneurs have is creating a movement that is actually bigger than themselves, because a lot of times your own branding and your own self goes into it so much. And I can't think of any community that is bigger than, you know, just even the Gay Pride organization, but really it is a complete movement. And so how do you feel like a couple of questions about that, like, how do you feel like you have emotionally separated yourself from it, because you have to sort of, like you just said, not take it personally, not take it like have a thick skin if things don't go exactly the way you want. And then also maintain that movement and cohesiveness. And you said one of your strengths is communicating with your community. And I'm sure you do that all throughout the year. And do you have any tips on how you really do reach out to people and hear from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really testing out ideas in a way that allows for you to understand and measure success. I think that one of the things that we're always doing is testing out new events, testing out new programs. I think that that's really important in kind of further growth, at least as it relates to Pride. You know, so don't be afraid to take risks. I think a lot of times, you know, as small business owners or entrepreneurs, you know, we oftentimes can be afraid to take large risks. And I think that there's been some risks along the way that we've taken, and they've worked out in our favor. Specifically with World Pride, you know, there was a big discussion when we were bidding on World Pride on if we should even bid on World Pride, because we already had this really significant anniversary with the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. So there was a big dialogue about, well, do we really need to bid on World Pride? Is there, you know, is that something that we actually need, considering that we already have the 50th anniversary of Stonewall? And I really kind of led the way and said, no, we have to do both. we really have to kind of package it as one kind of singular experience, World Pride for the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And that risk, I think, alone contributed to a tremendous amount of success for this organization that we would have never seen if we wouldn't have hosted World Pride. So a lot of times it's like, follow your gut, follow your instincts. Don't be afraid to take risks, because I think a lot of times you have to do kind of take those on to be able to get to a level that I think, you know, people, where you kind of want to be, you know? And so that's, I would say my biggest learning on over the last 10 years is that just kind of trust your gut.
Yeah.
Take those big risks.
Do you feel like you are naturally you're excited about risk taking, or do you think it's something you've really had to push yourself as you've grown into this role and as you've pushed the vision for Pride bigger?
I think that it's something that you develop with over time. I think that, you know, I took a big risk just joining this organization, in the sense that, like, I didn't, you know, a bulk of, you know, why they hired me originally was to help fundraise for the organization. And I had no experience fundraising. I didn't have any sales experience. You know, I had, you know, minor sales experience with Out Magazine, but just in the sales department. I had never really had a background in closing large deals or anything like that. And so, you know, I think it's understanding that, like, you may think that you have a certain skill set, but there are, you know, a lot of things that we don't really kind of realize in ourselves until you're put into a situation. And so, you know, what I've found, it just from working here, is that I'm actually a pretty decent fundraiser. And, you know, it's something I would have never expected from myself 10 years ago. And so it's kind of putting yourself in awkward positions or in awkward settings.
Yeah, out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, you're not comfortable with, that I think allows for personal growth, professional growth. And I think that that's helped us get to, you know, the level that we're at right now. Is I kind of look for staff to take on a very entrepreneurial way of working at this organization that allows for them to test different areas that, you know, they may not have any experience in. But I think that's the great thing about being a small business owner or being a small organization, is that, like, you can really find your footing in a lot of different areas, because there are just there's so few kind of personal resources to help support you. So you're kind of all doing it on your own, right? And so it's you can kind of, you know, test out different areas that I think you may be surprised in yourself later on down the line.
Do you feel like in becoming better, I guess, for lack of a better word, but better at risk taking and more, you know, familiar with risk taking, you've also become a bit more comfortable with failure? Because I feel like one comes with the other. You know, you can take a lot of risks and it can pay off, but usually I know in my entrepreneurial experience, for every risk I've taken, I've failed. And then for every win I've had, there's been a failure with it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always going to be failure in everything that you do. And, you know, I think that failure a lot of times allows for you to take a step back and realize some things about yourself and about the process and the risk. And I kind of always look at failure as a learning on how to become better. So I think that failure is natural, and failure is a part of the process. And, you know, it's just a part of the ride, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, you just got to buckle up and count on it. Awesome. Well, you are incredibly inspirational, and I really appreciate you sharing some behind the scenes of what we can expect out of this. And I'm going to say it again, congratulations on World Pride, because I know that 12.5-hour parade was probably not the shortest day of your life.
Yeah, definitely not.
I'm sure you probably didn't take a full breath the whole time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I said, I mean, it's always super inspiring. Every single year I have this, tradition of looking down the march route and having a moment where I realize that there are kids on the sidelines, there are grown adults that have just come out, or there are people that have never experienced New York City Pride for the first time. And that alone, and that idea that we're changing lives at that singular moment is always something that I look forward to every single year, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Gives me chills just thinking about it. Amazing. Well, thank you for everything that you do. I know that you have probably changed more people's lives than we'll ever know, and it's very, very inspirational to just talk to you and hear how dedicated you are to this work. And I'm really grateful that you came on to talk to us. I have a few lightning round questions for you. Are you ready?
Sounds good.
What is your go-to when you're having a bad day? What's the first thing you do?
Go-to for cardio.
Cardio. Love that. What
Yeah.
are you most proud of in your career so far?
Getting Madonna to perform.
My God. I don't know if I'll ever do anything that amazing. I'll see myself out now. That's awesome. Do you have an inspirational podcast or book that you like to motivate you or keep you inspired?
I don't have a regular podcast that I'm a big fan of NPR. So
there you go.
I will listen to NPR podcasts all the time. I think that they're super inspirational. I like learning about the world and learning about where we're at, where we're headed. And, NPR has always been that media outlet that I listen to on the regular to kind of learn about the world.
This is not part of my speed questions, but I just am thinking of it, and hopefully I'm not opening up a can of worms by asking it. In your office, have you had to create any rules or guidelines around politic talks? Because I'm sure it can get somewhat exhausting.
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's weird because I feel like generally LGBT people, now there are some exceptions, are all kind of have shared political views. Obviously, it's not 100% all the time, but within our office, we're all pretty liberal and we all have a pretty shared vision of the world and where we're headed and what needs to change. So
yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, we don't really experience that too much. Sometimes you experience that, maybe in committee meetings within the organization where you may have a member that has a different political view from you, but
yeah.
Not too often.
I wasn't so much thinking debates in the office. I feel like if anything, you guys are all probably very much on the same page, especially with certain policies or things going on. I worked at a nonprofit before I worked for myself, and sometimes it would just be a whole day of can you believe this is happening? No. Can you believe this is happening? No. We would just all be
oh yeah,
what is happening?
Yeah, no, we have a very open communication flow in our office, and we're always the great thing is with the staff, we all get along very well, and we all really love working here, and it's always awesome to see a small group of passionate people bring, this experience to life every single year is always super inspiring.
Yeah, amazing. Well, where can people find out more about you and or your organization, and what is an exciting thing coming up next?
Well, so like I said, we're in the process of planning the 50th anniversary of the NYC Pride March, which will be taking place next June 2020.
Come to New York for it if you guys don't live here.
Come to New York. We'll have lots of different events, probably maybe not as many as we had this year, but still probably about 20. And then you can learn more about all of our events at nycpride.org or follow us on the wide array of social channels at NYC Pride pretty much across all platforms. And that's kind of the best way to keep in touch.
Fabulous. And that will all be in the show notes, you guys. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come talk with us and inspire us about what it means to build community, take risks, follow what you believe in, go through adversity, have a thick skin and keep going and, you know, keeping the bigger picture in mind. It's very inspirational and we're really grateful.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, visionaries, we'll talk to you soon. Here is to your biggest vision.